Brooke, and you're listening to the Vintage Gardener Podcast, which is where I give you tips and tricks for gardening, specifically if you're in South Jersey, Zone 7A. So today's podcast is not going to be about a gardening topic per se. If you listen to the podcast, you know last week I did a podcast on soil, and one before that, which was admittedly quite some time ago, I think was on, actually I don't even remember what it was on. Actually, I think it was on flower societies. This one, I'm going to be giving you guys a mid-season review on my plant trials. So if you are not watching me on YouTube or you're not part of my Facebook group, number one, you should be. You guys should head right on over there and join. You will know that the reason I started this blog, this podcast, and my YouTube channel is because eventually I would like to grow flowers and sell them. And specifically, I want to grow heirloom flowers, which is why I call myself the vintage gardener. I like vintage styles of gardening. It doesn't matter what type of style. I just like the old-fashioned gardening, and I do like old-fashioned flowers. And one of the things that I've mentioned before was that I had a frustration because, I could not find the flowers that I would like to grow because nobody is growing them. So the thing with heirloom flowers is because most people don't grow them and you can't get them in most stores, it's not clear how some of these flowers will actually do, in New Jersey, in this area. So I decided for the next few years, I'm going to be doing plant trials. So number one, I'm going to be trying to master growing these plants from seed because that's all that's out there. And number two, I'm going to be seeing how well they do in my garden. And so annuals, I'm not particularly too worried about the annuals because those are things that typically only last one season. The real trial will be things like, perennials like lupine and, peonies, which I'm actually growing from seed, because those are the things that, because they stay in your garden, it's very important to know what things will actually work, what things won't. So gardening this year was very interesting. First off, I'm in a new house. I purchased a old Victorian farmhouse that I named Wildfell Manor. It is a bigger house. It is a bigger property than what I had before. The topography of my house, my yard is different. It's very flat here. My last garden had a serious slope. And so there were some challenges that I had this year that I did not count on. And it's just one of those types of things I wouldn't have been able to know that until I actually started growing things here. So the biggest thing was, I started seeds in a unheated greenhouse or a hoop house. You may be more familiar with that term. The reason I did that is that in my last house, I tried growing seeds, had no success. As a matter of fact, this is the first year I've actually had success growing and transplanting seeds into the garden. And so when I tried in my last garden, it just didn't work. I think the only seed that I started indoors that made it outside were hollyhocks, and they just nothing happened. They didn't survive. And that was because I didn't have indoor growing light with the growing lights. I didn't have that. One thing I did on accident at my last house was I put some seeds in the ground, and I just was like, whatever, this is never gonna work. And wonder, they came up and they bloomed. That year, the things that I did from seed were Ms. Mars sunflower, which is one of my all-time favorites. The other thing was Cosmos. Those are the first two things I ever tried from seed and worked. Last year, I did have my house on the market, but I did actually start, I think it was Zinnia and Envy. That's what I tried growing from seed outdoor. I threw it in direct sow outdoor, and I actually got a bloom. They look better at this garden, and that'll be for reasons that I'll go into later. So one thing I wanted to do with this garden is I wanted to simulate, things growing the way they grow outdoors. Because the thing with grow lights indoors is that, you're constantly adjusting the light. Growing indoors, in my opinion, sometimes the plants may not be as strong. Then you have an issue with, you have to harden them off, and that takes a long time. And, in real life, I'm an attorney, and so I don't necessarily have the time, to be, for example, putting my plants out 1 hour at a time, and bringing them back in and that sort of thing. That's just not going to work. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit more workable for the type of schedule that I had. And, with the unheated greenhouse, it's almost, to a certain extent, it was like winter sowing. Honestly, I think that's the best way to describe it. It was like winter sowing. Except I think I probably would have had more success if I had just done winter sowing. So that's what I did. So I got a greenhouse. It was by King Canopy, which I had used at my last house. It was not quite as successful at this house. In fact, if you've been watching my YouTube channel, you will know that the greenhouse flipped over a couple of times. And the reason that happened was, what I didn't realize with this property is that there's no windbreak. So when the wind rushes through my property, there's nothing to slow it down. In my other yard, there was a fence at the back to separate my property from the cemetery behind it. My neighbor had a fence, and because of the way my property sloped and where I had the greenhouse located, it was just protected from a lot of wind. So leaving the flaps open to vent it, I did in windy days and it was fine. But here, doing that, it acted like a kite. And so it was a real issue. And with it flipping over a couple of times, it really did destroy a lot of my seeds. I started out, I think I probably planted close to 2,000 seeds, which is a teeny bit ambitious considering the fact that I had never grown anything successfully from seed. And because it flipped over a couple of times, I would say that I probably lost at least half of those seeds, which does make me very, very sad. So that was the greenhouse. I started seeds. The first set of seeds I started were poppies, which you will probably remember from some of the videos that I've posted. I also did calendula. I think I did some cornflower, which is also known as bachelor button. And pretty much the flowers that I started as a result of, like, I follow this flower farmer, Florette, and I sign up to get their newsletters, and at a certain point in time, there was an email sent out saying, oh, now is when you should start, and they listed all the flowers. And so that's what I went by. The only thing is, and I should have known better because, I've done podcasts on this, Florette Farm is located in a different zone, in a different climate than I am. And so some of the things, let's put it this way, some of the plants that, like for example, cornflower, which if you check out any website specifically says it can handle frost, yeah, I can tell you right now, they did not. They did not handle frost. We got a late frost. It was just not good. I lost almost all of my cornflower, and if I remember correctly, I think I started 144 seeds. And of those 144 seeds, oh man, I can't even, if I put 40 in the ground, I'd be surprised. And quite frankly, because of everything that was going on, I think their growth stalled, because I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be taller than what I have. Now what I have, although it's short and I think it's probably stunted, it's still blooming. They're reblooming. And so it's very pretty, and I'm probably going to cut some of the little flowers to bring inside, but I think the heads on them are supposed to be bigger. But yeah, so what I learned for next year is that I will use Florette's guide as an actual guide, and I have since then, I have realized what flowers for here in New Jersey, I need to start a little bit later. So cornflower is one of those things that I will definitely be starting a little bit later to avoid having the issue that I did. Let's see. So what else? So there was that. My gardening. One of the things that was difficult this year was COVID. I was planning to put beds flanking my driveway, which I did, but my plan was to rent a sod cutter and just remove the grass, which, given the small, well, for a sod cutter, that would have been a small space. And quite frankly, I would imagine using the sod cutter probably would have been akin to, using a lawnmower. And if I had, mowed an 8x40 strip of grass, it probably would have taken me 10 minutes. Now, granted, it would have taken me longer to actually get the grass up and, take it to the back. But obviously, it would have been a lot easier than what I did, which was dig all the grass out by hand. Yes, I know I was crazy. And let me tell you what, I was sore for it was a couple months. I was sore for a month straight. It was brutal. It was hard, but I got it done and it looks great. And so that is something different than what I did at my last property. With my last property, I created beds by outlining and then using a tiller. And I think because all the grass was getting chopped up, I thought, okay, well, I've killed it, and I kind of hadn't. The roots were still down there, and they regenerated. And so even though I put the newspaper, I did layers of newspaper with mulch. If I were to poke a hole in the newspaper, I could see the grass roots underneath of it. And anyway, that grass, I fought a lot to keep that grass from reasserting itself. I can honestly say with this year, it was a lot easier. Don't get me wrong, I did still have some grass come through, but I don't know. I think because I had removed it, and maybe it was just like the type of thing, it had to germinate and then grow through the mulch. It just, I don't know. I found like it was easier to keep weeded. I could get the grass out much more easily than I could at my last house. And I feel like with weeding this year, it was a lot nicer. It was just a lot easier. So that part I'm really happy about. So then there are the plants themselves. With my greenhouse getting flipped over a couple of times, all the tags fell off. And so one of the things I struggled with was I didn't know what I was planting. I mean, generally, yeah, I knew what seeds I had sown, but because, for me, I don't know about you, I've always been really bad at identifying seedlings, especially if I've never, grown that plant before, because, usually when plants get their second leaves, that's the true set. That looks like it's the real leaves. And so with things like hollyhock, I've grown that from seed before. Oh, you know what? That was the third type of seed I grew at my last house, hollyhock. I know what those seeds look like. Sunflowers, I know what those look like. Bachelor button, calendula, what's the other stuff? Baby's breath, because I actually did get a lone plant. Nasturtium. Well, nasturtium I recognize because it's an herb, so I'd seen it before, so it had some distinct leaves. But things like cosmos, actually, you know what? I did grow some cosmo, and so that one I did recognize. But cosmo, in my opinion, looked a lot very similar to nigella, and that part one I had never seen before. So there was a lot of flowers that I really had never seen before. Like, another one, stock. I had never seen stock before. And I've never grown it from seed, and I grew specialty kind. And sometimes even when you have, like, for example, zinnias, like, I grew tall zinnias, and then I grew one that was like a dwarf size, and the leaves looked slightly different. So it was just one of those things that I'd struggled because I didn't know what I had planted. And some of the plants, I wasn't sure if they were weeds or not. I figured some of them weren't weeds because it's like, okay, I did recall planting, like, for example, I have 2 magnolia trees, and I do recall planting some things in front of it, but some things, yeah, I did end up with a lot of weeds that I was kind of battling back just because I was terrified to pull them because I thought that they were flowers. And so, now that they're blooming, obviously I can tell now what it is. And of course, next year when I grow them again, because I really loved everything that came up. Now I actually know what they look like. So it won't be an issue. Now for plants that I'm trying to think, there were some plants I had a devil of a time germinating to the point that I'll try it again next year and I'll see what happened. The first one was Hungarian blue poppies. I didn't get a single seedling off of that. I planted a lot of poppy. They were mother of pearl. Actually, that one germinated like a champ. I had a lot of peony poppies and they germinated well. And I'm trying to think. Like I said, the one I didn't get a single germination on was the Hungarian poppy. I did plant this one, I think, called Black Swan. It eventually germinated, but I think the issue with that one was the seeds were a little bit older. So, yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to transplant any poppies, which is very sad because I planted, how many did I plant? I planted over 200 poppy seeds. But once again, those were ones that got turned over. So next year, I'm going to try Hungarian blue poppy. And one of the things I'm going to do with that poppy, as well as the rest of them, is I'm going to definitely cold stratify them. And so what I'm going to do is maybe October, I'm going to put the seeds in a plastic bag and put them in my refrigerator to let them get nice and chilled. Poppies are also one of those things that tend to winter sow very well. So I am going to try some winter sowing, but I'm not going to use milk jugs. I'm going to use 2 cups. I'm going to use like a solo cup, and then I'm going to use a slightly smaller plastic cup and kind of do it that way. So that way I can put fewer seeds in, because one thing I can tell you that I think probably caused me issues was I didn't really thin things out. Some things I just let the plant grow into, 2 plants grow into one, and it actually worked very well. But some things I know when I separated things, I probably did damage the roots, and that could be one reason why it took things so long to bloom. So the other plant that did not germinate well was Bells of Ireland. It just didn't do well. I probably should have known I had a problem when I saw the germination rate on the one packet of seeds said 57%. And so that means that almost half of them don't germinate. So I did look on the instructions. Apparently that's a plant that really does better with direct sowing. So I'm going to modify what I do. So I think what I'm going to do for that one is I'm going to grow definitely, well actually I'm going to do this for all of them, but definitely that's one that I would grow in a solo cup, since it's much deeper, because I think if I do that, I do more solo cups, I think that it will simulate, because it's more dirt in there, it will simulate better growing outside. I'll give it a try for a couple years to see if I can do it. And if not, then that may just be one of those flowers that I just can't do. I'm sure there's a reason we don't see Bells of Ireland, and I'm sure that's probably it, because it is very tricky to germinate. So those are the 2 that I think just nothing happened. Everything else I did germinate. This year I had better success with not losing plants to damping off. I think that's because what I did that was differently, what was different this year was that in some cases I pre-moistened the soil before I put it in. And because of that, I didn't have to, when they were germinating, I felt like it wasn't as moist as it typically was. So they came up, and the ones that did come up, most of them did not have that particular fungal issue. So things that I would say did not work was the containers, the trays that I used. I used the Jiffy Pro Hacks, which is, there's 72 per tray. The Pro Hacks, one of the things that's on there is saying, oh, it's supposed to help root development, you'll have a bigger plant. And I don't know, I wasn't a real fan. It's not like the plants got bigger. Like, you know, listen, I buy sell trays from the grower, and so there's these little force pack type deals, and those plants get kind of big in there. And this was supposed to say, it was actually saying, like, this will do a better job, but the plants really just didn't get very big in there. So I don't know, I'm not convinced that's the way to go. So next year I'm gonna go with cups. The second set of plants that I started, which were zinnias, I got some of those little mouthwash cups from Wegmans, and I poked holes in them and did it that way. And there's some other things I grew in there, and it did really well. Like the zinnia, I was very surprised. Like the zinnias seemed to like it, even though some of them got a little bit root bound. I tell you what, when I put them in the ground, they definitely did not get stunted in growth, because a lot of the zinnias are at least 2 feet high. Some of them are actually approaching waist height, so they did really well. So I'm either going to I probably will go a little bit bigger than the mouthwash size. Maybe I'll do like a 4-ounce cup at least. But I think what I'm really looking to do is getting just solo cups, whatever color, or clear ones, and doing it that way. I did start recently some sunflowers, and I got to go put those out in the garden. They're tall. Granted, it's a taller sunflower, but they are tall. I did check a couple of them. The roots are, there's a lot more room for the roots. And so I definitely like that. So I think for a lot of things, particularly poppies, which don't transplant well, I think it's gonna work better for me. And of course, I gotta get my greenhouse situation squared away. And speaking of which, I have made a decision on a greenhouse. One of the things that I think that hampered my ability in terms of getting greenhouse is, I don't have any carpentry skills, and so because of that, I was getting stuff that was ready made. But I'm going to get an easy frame greenhouse, and what it is that this company gives you the brackets, and basically you go and buy your own 2x2 lumber. And so the thing with the brackets is that you don't have to make any angled cuts. The brackets themselves take care of it. The only thing you have to do is the straight cuts in terms of length. So my dad did let me borrow his slide saw, and so that's what I will be using. And once you kind of frame it up, you can cover it with any material. You can cover it with just regular greenhouse plastic. You can get some of that corrugated plastic from Lowe's. My eventual goal is to completely cover it with corrugated plastic, but for right now, because of course that corrugated plastic is much more expensive, I think I'll probably just do the corrugated plastic on the roof, and then on the sides of it, I think I'm just going to do just greenhouse plastic, and then over time just slowly do it so that I have the greenhouse and the corrugated plastic all over it. Also with this particular system, you anchor it, and I'm not really sure how you anchor it at this point, but of course I'll figure it out. You do anchor it to railroad ties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Lowe's bring out some railroad ties. Now that I have a saw, like the slide saw I have will actually cut through railroad ties, but with the railroad ties you can drill a hole through them, and you can put like those heavy duty metal stakes to keep it secured to the ground, or rebar, which is exactly what I'll be doing to make sure that it doesn't, to give it support and make sure it doesn't, fly off, in the wind. And then you put the frame on top of it and just secure it to the, to the railroad tie. And so should keep it from, blowing off and that sort of thing. This company, does have add-ons like, vents for the top, and as well as extra doors and that sort of thing. So that is the plan. And I think with that, one thing I won't have to deal with is losing my plants. On the inside, I decided that, especially now that my dad is letting me use his saw, and now that I've built some raised beds, I'm going to actually build more heavy duty shelving with wood, and I'm going to get the caster wheels to put on it, so that if I need to move it around, I can do that. And basically I'll just put the wood to make a frame, and then put hardware cloth, so that when I water it, the water will go through and I don't have anything collecting. So that's the plan. That's what my plans are thus far. And of course, I've got more season to go, so that may change. And so I'm also getting estimates on having water spigots put out, and that will be
Look at that. That is so beautiful. I need one of those in my yard.
But, I kind of know where I'm going with that. I've been getting some estimates. They're pretty reasonable. And so next year, of course, will be, the plant trials year 2. I will have a new garden. I will be doing the parterre garden, and hopefully I've already posted the YouTube video. If not, it'll be coming shortly. And so it will be 36 by 60. So it'll be a much more substantial garden. And so I will have to plant even more plants than what I did this year. And of course, it's going to be a lot more imperative that I not lose any plants to my greenhouse flipping over. So, thus far, I've been very happy with my success. I did still get to plant several hundred plants. It's been fun watching everything come up. It's been fun playing the guessing game of, well, what did I plant here? And, the things that I planted, I love the way it turned out. I'm excited for next year to do it again and improve on what I did before. And, I'll get the hang of it, and I'll have, be able to plant more and more things that I grow. And hopefully I won't have any more issues with massive amounts of plants being killed for, various reasons. So that is pretty much it for the mid-season. So in the fall, I will kind of give you a final wrap up. I'll tell you about any disease issues I had with the plants, what things worked, what things didn't, in terms of seed collection, cutting flowers, because I did do a lot of cutting flowers, and tell you what I thought about it. And then I'll tell you what my plans for next year's garden. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully it inspires you to go out and grow some of your own stuff. And hey, if you lose half your seedlings, it's not the end of the world. You can still have a beautiful garden. And you guys will, I guess I was just going to say I was going to see you guys, but I will be seeing you. There'll be another podcast coming up soon. It's probably going to be on a plant topic. I'll be talking to you about one of my favorite plants, which is roses, and all the things, it'll be a multi-episode series on roses and everything you need to know with roses. And you'll get to hear my trials and tribulations in growing roses and how I successfully grow them now. So thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys in the next podcast.